and that it was taking proper steps legally to get there, and it was going through all of the right channels. And now today I watched a video from the guy that's spearheading this. His name is Ross. He posted a video called The End of Stop Killing Games, where he's giving an update on where everything's at and how it's kind of at the finish line here with a lot of failure to show for it, with only a few other chances to fight back. Now, before getting into the weeds on the topic, I want to get this in the beginning because I imagine the vast majority of people won't watch the whole thing. I'm putting a link to the full video on Stop Killing Games, as well as a link to where you'd go to help support the Stop Killing Games initiative, because there's only a little bit of time left for the most important parts of it now that it's at the end. So if you know what the movement is and want to support it but didn't know where, the resources are in the description, or if you want to get it right from like the source, I have a link to his video. But I want to go into it myself here because it is a topic that I do feel very strongly about. But for those that don't know anything about Stop Killing Games, I'm going to let him explain it in his own words, so that way you can get an actual, correct, informed explanation of what the initiative is. And the reason I say it like that, kind of like fucking all, pinky out, snooty, is because a lot of people don't even really know what this is because of people like Pirate Software completely misrepresenting what the initiative was.
As a refresher, Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement to stop publishers from effectively destroying video games they have already sold to customers.
I'll pause right there. The simplest, bare bones, birthday suit, butt-ass naked explanation for what this is. Stop destroying things that people have paid money to own. I think that is a very understandable, very reasonable take. Very agreeable. Now I want to quickly jump to a different spot in this video because I think it's important to have this in the beginning because it's something a lot of people have heard that comes from someone that is just wrong about it. It's the Pirate Software portion. Ross is addressing the video Pirate Software made many months ago. Ross even says that he didn't plan on doing that because he didn't want to be seen as using this for drama farming, because it would start to make the movement look less of like a legitimate initiative and more of just like drama slop content type thing. But he finally starts talking about Pirate Software here because it's at the end of the life cycle of this initiative and it's not looking promising, so he's willing to do anything to try and set the record straight and hopefully start getting more momentum back to the movement, because the damage Pirate Software did to it through his video was substantial.
This video came out right as we were building momentum, then except for one boost in Germany, the signatures started drying up like clockwork. Ford does not understand what Stop Killing Games is. Here it is in his words.
So for those who don't understand, the Stop Killing Games initiatives is basically, we don't want single-player games to have DRM that the developers can turn off and thus render the single-player games inactive anymore. This is what they want to change. They need to be specific that they're talking about single-player games that do not need a server to support them.
No.
And as much as they want it to be about specifically games where it is a single-player game that has always online functionality, it would impact every live service game that exists, instead of just targeting single-player, always online games.
No, that's not what it is. Stop Killing Games includes single-player games, but nothing about it is specific to them. He completely made that up, and I have no idea where he got that impression. It's the first line on the website. Stop Killing Games is a consumer movement started to challenge the legality of publishers destroying video games they have sold to customers. But the movement includes all this stuff from earlier, and he was mostly talking about the initiative.
He didn't even get the Cliff Notes summary right. He missed all the QTEs and got the bad ending on understanding the initiative from the jump here. Ross is correct. This has nothing to do with just single-player only games that require an online connection, that when the online connection is severed, you lose access to the game. Like, yeah, that is included in all of this, but that's not like what the whole movement is about. And for some reason, Pirate Software is stun-locked on that, like fixated, as if that is the actual like meat and potatoes of Stop Killing Games. They need to be more specific in their language about it being single-player, always online connectivity games. when that's just not what it's about. Like, they're not being specific about that because that is not what they are specifically targeting. It is about the whole practice of destroying games that consumers have already purchased and having no end-of-life plans for games that are being sunset. So, for example, The Crew. The Crew is an example everyone is going to reference and talk about because Ubisoft is still currently in a lawsuit battling against it for what happened with this game. I've yapped about it quite a bit, so I'm not just going to regurgitate that. I'm sure a lot of you already know the story about it. But basically, you buy The Crew, Ubisoft pulls the plug on the servers, you can't play The Crew anymore, now it's just an old wet dream of what once was. And they are facing a lawsuit, and while this is in the umbrella of Stop Killing Games, it is not the only thing Stop Killing Games is referencing when it comes to this practice. Pirate Software is so hung up on it being single-player games that people lose access to, when that is a component of it, but not the entire focus.
Well, the short version is the initiative is about requiring publishers to have end-of-life plans for games they've sold to customers in the future. So when they shut them down, customers can continue running them without their support. So that's one thing Thor doesn't understand, but he also seems to think this is about converting multiplayer games to single-player.
Transitioning an entire multiplayer server-side game into a single-player video game, which means rebalancing the entire experience around single-player, rebuilding everything in the entire game. How are you going to do that with Final Fantasy XIV? You're just going to make all the raids soloable? Imagine the day that World of Warcraft shuts down, and suddenly you have to make it a single-player game for every individual that ever bought the game. That's what they're asking for.
No.
Because they would have to sunset live service games as a single-player experience. The idea that suddenly you need to make every single live service game playable single-player offline? No, dude.
Correct. No.
This part is more confusing than Finnegan's Wake, because nowhere in anything on Stop Killing Games has this even been like a talking point from anyone besides Pirate Software. I don't know where he pieced this puzzle together. Like I don't get it. Like, if I'm gonna try and like really reach here and give like a charitable explanation for this take, maybe he's extrapolating based on the idea that if publishers have to have end-of-life plans for their games, that includes MMOs, where once the game is getting sunset, you're pulling the plug on it, you would then need to turn the game over to the community in a playable state, an accessible state, like give the code to them. Thus, it'd turn it into a single-player experience, so the onus would be on the developers to rebalance their game to be a single-player experience for them? I guess. I have no idea. That still just doesn't make any sense, but maybe that's the tree he's barking up with that thought process. I really don't know, because Stop Killing Games at no point ever says any of these multiplayer games need to be converted to single player. That really is outlandish. And the more I think about it, like, the more nonsensical it becomes, because even in Pirate Software's hypothetical fanfic there, why would the developers need to rebalance the game? They would just turn over the code to the community and just it'd be in that state. They're no longer responsible for balancing the game. That's the whole point. They're not indefinitely supporting it. They would just be responsible of leaving the game in an accessible state to the community while they would shut down the servers on their end. Like, they wouldn't need to go back through with a whole development team and, like, you know, tweak the game to be single player compatible. It just doesn't make sense. Like, I really do not understand that one. But apparently a lot of people latched on to that talking point from Pirate Software as something that Stop Killing Games was asking for and how unreasonable it was. Which, if that's what Stop Killing Games was asking for, it would be unreasonable. But that's not what it's asking for.
Nowhere in there does it say that it's directly targeting always online single-player games.
Oh, he's so close. He's so close to getting it.
It is vague, and because of that, it will impact
He never has that light bulb moment. Well, he is correct in that statement. It's almost as if that's not what the initiative is asking for.
I know this part is once again just reinforcing that he doesn't know what the Stop Killing Games movement is about, but I have to just show you this because it is so fascinating, because he himself literally calls out that Stop Killing Games at no point explicitly mentions single-player always-online games or anything like that. And for some reason, instead of following the breadcrumbs that would naturally lead him to the conclusion of, oh, maybe I misunderstood, maybe because it's absent here, that's not what this is actually about. Instead, he uses it as a criticism against the Stop Killing Games initiative entirely, saying it's just too vague, it's way too vague. The reason it is not explicitly stated there is because that is not what the whole initiative is about. It is not specifically targeting that thing that you keep saying that it is. I don't know how that never clicked.
But those were his streams with a smaller audience. What does he say in his big YouTube video with over 1 million views that he had time to research?
If we're trying to kill off the practice of developers putting together a live service game, pitching it as a single-player experience, and then taking away support in the future.
Now he's changed it again and is making up how it's about single-player games are advertised. What is he doing?
It needs to be specific about the business practice it's trying to defeat, which is specifically companies that are doing this under the guise of it being a single-player game, but adding online-only functionality that is not necessary and doesn't add any gameplay elements. That's the problem.
No, that's not it at all.
This is a really strong section from Ross here because the clips that you saw moments ago were from his stream. When he took more time to watch it and digest it, he still came back in that video misrepresenting it. Like, it never dawned on him. Like, on stream, he could write it off as like, oh, he didn't grasp it in the moment, maybe later on he did. Well, then he made the video where he still was talking about things that are just not what Stop Killing Games was about, and this was the one that really blew up and really started to kind of dismantle the Stop Killing Games momentum.
If we don't like the idea of live service games as a whole, I get it. Don't play live service games then. Don't agree to those terms.
No, he's getting a new thing wrong now. We're not against them existing. We're against them being destroyed with no recourse for the customer.
Pirate Software then goes on to talk about like the business practice of misleading consumers into thinking that what they're buying is a product as opposed to a license to a product, which is a totally separate thing. And then he criticizes Stop Killing Games for not being specific about that thing that he is bringing up as opposed to what Stop Killing Games is talking about. So he's using that against them for some reason. And then Ross goes into like the license talk.
Our problem is not with licenses failing to inform people. Blizzard says they can take away your purchase for no reason. That sounds pretty clear to me. Our problem is those terms are so hostile to consumers and the medium that they should be taken off the table entirely. This needs regulation. Forget video games. If you look at basic commerce for hundreds of years, when you paid money, you either got to keep what you paid for, or if it was a service, you were told when your access ends. The vast majority of online-only games do neither of those.
He's exactly right. That is a huge problem. Now, Pirate Software is correct here about these companies that will mislead consumers through this fraudulent advertising on what you're actually buying, because in a lot of cases, you don't own any of the shit that you are buying. It is pretty much a rental. You get a permission slip to access the content. That is an issue, and not making it abundantly clear to consumers that that is what you are buying is a problem. And so too is the actual agreements, as Ross demonstrates with Blizzard, where it says they can just completely terminate it for no reason at all. It really does go against the basic idea of commerce entirely. Video games are in a totally different ball game when it comes to that, because half the time you don't realize that you're just buying an admission ticket to a game. You're not actually buying the game. You also don't know how long that's going to last. Again, to go back to Concord, that shit lasted less than a fucking, fucking rainstorm, basically. Like, there is just so many problems. So I don't know why Pirate Software would be so harsh on Stop Killing Games for not addressing specific things that he himself is bringing up or making up in regards to it. It just doesn't compute. It really is a video that did significant damage to an actually positive initiative that aimed to help consumers in the video game space. All based on his complete misrepresentation of it, which was a complete mess.
If you try to tell me that every studio needs to run their live service game indefinitely or not want to run one at all, then no one's going to run them.
Oh no! He wheeled out that line about publishers having to support the game forever. He was literally watching the video earlier where it says it won't do that in big letters. That wasn't enough. We just can't stop gamers from going there, even when we spell it out.
That's the last clip I want to show from this section on the Pirate Software video, but it's a very important one because this is something a lot of people also think the Stop Killing Games initiative is about, where developers, publishers will have to support their games forever. Like, until the fucking heat death of the universe, they'll have to support these games under the initiative. When that is not the case. It is very simply asking that when the game has reached the end of its life cycle, the publishers, developers don't want to work on it any longer, to turn it over to the community to still be in a playable, accessible state so the product can still exist. There is some more nuance, obviously, to how that works, given, like, publisher-developer licensing and a lot of, like, the code, the binary, that kind of thing. There is a lot at play under the hood there, of course, but it is something that Stop Killing Games isn't naive to, and it is something that is talked about. But I'm not going to dive too deep into it. I encourage you to check more in on it. But this whole belief that it is about endlessly supporting a live service game, even when it makes no sense to do so and it's beyond dead and in the dirt, is ridiculous, because that is not what it is asking for. And a lot of people think that it is. It's not. Pirate Software got that wrong as well. Anyway, I'll stop yapping about it, but as mentioned in the beginning, most of Stop Killing Games hasn't been successful in getting change. And Ross has dedicated so much of his life to this, and it's clearly taken a big toll. Now he's doing everything he can for this last-ditch push to try and help. And there are two big things coming up that can do so. And it's what I linked at the very beginning of the at the very beginning of the video about the resources in the description. It's in regards to this.
One is for the UK to sign a government petition to bring this issue before Parliament. Though, keeping it real, I'm not terribly optimistic about this one, since the government response has been a mess by every definition. But the one that has a lot of power, so much so I think it could change the course of gaming history, is the European Citizens Initiative. Now, I said I'm approaching this like a time traveler because with the trajectory we're on, these are both going to fail. Again, this one is crazy powerful, but the hurdle we just couldn't get past was that it requires 1 million signatures from citizens of EU countries. And we've only made it just under halfway. What a lot of people don't realize is that in the EU especially, it's almost a state of lawlessness regarding the practice of game destruction. Is that the vast majority of games with an online requirement say they can be terminated at any time for any reason. Or Blizzard likes to say any or no reason. But according to the EU Commission, that might be a violation of Directive 93/13 EEC, which protects consumers against unfair terms in consumer contracts. So if that term is unfair, that means that part of the contract is null and void.
He goes on to explain how powerful that can be because of what a mess that is. Because there is so much gray area with how the video games currently operate in regards to those protections, it would be a legal headache that would require an analysis of the laws or implementation of new laws that could lead to, hopefully, an improvement when it comes to gaming. So the big hurdle was the signatures, needing 1 million, and currently it's at like 460,000, so it doesn't reach the threshold. I've been very vocal from the very beginning about how little faith I have in petitions, but that's just from the perspective of an American. In America, petitions are more worthless than toilet paper. You're better off just writing what you want on a note to Santa Claus and shipping it to the North Pole than you are doing anything with a petition in this country. I don't know how different it is in the EU. Maybe it really is this powerful there that could lead to substantial change and improvement when it comes to games and preservation and all of what we've already talked about. Hopefully, I mean, that's really all that's left for the Stop Killing Games initiative, which sucks, but that's the position that it's in, unfortunately. And I wanted to talk about it because I really want to see something change with the games industry. I've said that so many times recently, but it's in such a sorry state. I mean, I'm talking big budget AAA space. Indies, I think, are absolutely crushing it, absolutely golden right now in the golden age of indie games, but overall, in the big budget games and the way the industry keeps pushing things, it sucks. So, I wanted to talk about Stop Killing Games here. Hopefully things can turn around and maybe a huge W's around the corner for the Stop Killing Games initiative. We'll see, but anyway, I want to commend Ross for his hard work spearheading all of this for so long, and that's really about it. See ya.
This video is brought to you by Ground News. Today, a new law in France is coming into effect requiring adult websites to verify users' ages using personal data in an attempt to curb minors' access to pornography. Unsurprisingly, this law hasn't gone down well with mainstream porn sites, and just a few days prior, Pornhub, along with its sister sites YouPorn and RedTube, blocked access to their websites within France in protest. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look at France's new anti-porn law and whether it will actually work. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. Let's start with some context. A few years ago, several scandals, most famously the French Bukkake criminal investigation, drew the public eye to the malpractices in France's porn industry and concerns of serious sexual and physical abuse of performers. In 2022, a French Senate report titled Hell Behind the Scenes was prepared for the French Parliament, which alerted the government to systemic abuse in the industry. This report also argued that children were heavily This video is brought to you by Ground News. Today, a new law in France is coming into effect requiring adult websites to verify users' ages using personal data in an attempt to curb minors' access to pornography. Unsurprisingly, this law hasn't gone down well with mainstream porn sites, and just a few days prior, Pornhub, along with its sister sites YouPorn and RedTube, blocked access to their websites within France in protest. So in this video, we thought we'd take a look at France's new anti-porn law and whether it will actually work. Never miss an episode and always feel in the loop by subscribing and ringing the bell. Let's start with some context. A few years ago, several scandals, most famously the French Bukkake criminal investigation, drew the public eye to the malpractices in France's porn industry and concerns of serious sexual and physical abuse of performers. In 2022, a French Senate report titled Hell Behind the Scenes was prepared for the French Parliament, which alerted the government to systemic abuse in the industry. This report also argued that children were heavily exposed to pornographic content and called for better age regulation. For context, with around 5.5 million pornographic websites operating in France alone, the average age of access to pornographic content for the first time in France, and in most of Europe, is around 13 years old. Although, according to some experts, some children are starting to consume pornography as young as 8, and in the last decade, the number of users younger than 13 accessing this type of content has been increasing. Unsurprisingly, the French public aren't too pleased about this. According to a survey of French citizens from 2023, 7 in 10 people reported they would be completely in favour of tougher age restrictions. In comparison, less than 1 in 10 respondents reported being quite against or very against a law blocking websites that don't enforce age restrictions for pornographic content. As such, decreasing the exposure of minors to pornographic content became a key priority for French legislators. At the start of 2020, speaking at UNESCO's celebration of the 30th anniversary of the Convention on Rights of the Child, French President Emmanuel Macron backed the idea of age regulation, saying, "We do not take a 13-year-old boy to a sex shop, not anything goes in the digital world." Then in July 2020, the French Parliament approved a mandatory age verification control on porn sites in an attempt to prevent access to children under 18, following the UK's lead. Unsurprisingly though, asking users to just tick a box saying they're over 18 didn't really work. So in 2023, the French government passed the so-called Siren Law, which introduced a new double anonymity system. For context, this is a 2-step age verification process that would require users to identify themselves with an official document, like a credit card or some form of ID, on a third-party platform, which would then validate their age and keep the pornographic platforms from seeking users' information and data. Then, the pornographic website would be able to grant access to the user without accessing personal names or other identifiable data. The French Parliament said that all porn websites operating in France would be under legal obligation to implement this system by the 7th of June 2025, and that the French media regulator, ARCOM, can request that porn sites be blocked and issue fines if it finds their checks are lacking. In reaction to the restrictions, a handful of sites began legal proceedings to avoid its application. In fact, in 2024, 4 major porn sites were blocked in France after they refused to comply with the age verification law. Most recently, in anticipation of the June 7th deadline, in protest, the parent company of Pornhub, Alo, decided to completely stop operating in France. On Wednesday, the 4th of June, French visitors to major adult sites like Pornhub, YouPorn, and RedTube were greeted not with explicit content, but with a message from Alo denouncing the government demands that they verify users' ages. For their part, Alo and other critics have 4 main complaints. First, they argue that it poses a risk to data privacy, taking particular issue with the requirement for a third-party platform to verify users' identities. Alo, and others to be fair, argue that outsourcing age verification to external platforms could expose personal data to hacking, leaks, or malicious misuse, which could have disastrous consequences in the form of blackmail, embarrassment, or even targeted advertising based on sexual preferences. Second, Alo maintains that the responsibility for age verification should not rest with adult websites. They argue that the financial burden of implementing and maintaining these costly age verification systems should really be on the tech giants like Apple, Microsoft, and Google, and for the age checks to be implemented at the device level. Essentially, Alo's argument here is that if your phone can recognize your face to unlock itself, it will be better at knowing if you're old enough to access a porn site. Third, Alo and others argue that these bans could open the door to broader internet censorship. Last year, Alo actually argued that a similar law introduced in Texas infringed on adults' constitutional rights to access protected speech. But the fourth and perhaps most popular argument against these sorts of laws is that, well, they just won't work. These laws can be easily circumvented with virtual private networks, or VPNs, which allow users to mask their location and pretend they're in another country. These are cheap, easy to use, and widely available, even to minors. This makes bypassing national restrictions extremely trivial, and we can already see this unfolding. NordVPN have reported a 170% usage increase in France since Wednesday, and within half an hour of Alo suspending its websites, ProtonVPN saw registrations increase by 1,000%. Similarly, there's a risk that banning mainstream porn websites could push people towards unregulated, darker parts of the web, which could ultimately make things worse. Nonetheless, despite these apparent risks, neither France's communications watchdog ARCOM nor the French government have been put off, with the French Minister for Gender Equality posting au revoir on X in response to the news that Pornhub was pulling out of France, claiming there will be less violent, degrading, and humiliating content accessible to minors in France. And, well, in their defense, while there are clearly privacy and censorship-related risks to any sort of online ban, this doesn't imply that France should just give up on the law entirely, especially given the widespread consensus in France that porn is too accessible for minors. Rather, it just means that the French government should be especially cautious about how the law is implemented to best mitigate any risks. It's also worth remembering that when critics of online regulation warn about slippery slopes, the slippery slope fallacy is just that, a fallacy. Similarly, while it's true that there are easy ways around it, this doesn't invalidate the law either. No public policy or law is 100% effective. We have laws against murder, for instance, but murders still happen, and this doesn't mean we should give up on laws against murder. This law isn't going to make it impossible for minors to access porn, but as long as it makes it sufficiently more difficult, such that fewer minors see porn, then the French government can claim some success. If you want to know more about this topic, there's plenty of other outlets reporting about it online. Unfortunately though, it's sometimes hard to tell exactly which way these outlets lean politically, making it difficult to understand exactly how your view of world events is being biased by the sources you're reading. That's where this week's sponsor, Ground News, comes in. Their website and app, developed by a former NASA engineer, allows us to pull back the curtain on media bias and have a look at exactly how each story is being covered. For instance, this story about Pornhub exiting France has been covered by 138 different sources. We know that around 19 of these have been reported by the left, and 18 of these have been reported by the right. That's not all though. Ground News has tons of genuinely useful features. Take their blind spots feed, for instance. This shows you the stories underreported by one side of the political spectrum or the other. For example, if you lean left, you probably missed this story on a recent report that claims white British people will be a minority in 40 years. Here at TLDR News, we think that Ground News is an incredibly useful tool for our current media landscape, one that's constantly trying to attract your attention and sway you towards or away from certain political viewpoints. So having a tool that helps you spot this and helps you take action really is a game changer. If you're interested in everything Ground News has to offer, you can get 40% off the Unlimited Access Vantage Plan subscription by using the link in the description or scanning the QR code on screen. This limited time offer is only available here, so make sure you go to ground.news/TLDR or click the link in the description to get started and support an independent news platform working to make the media landscape more transparent.
As you guys know, I am a fan of old ships, steamships, big boats. I have a Titanic Lego set that sits above me, ever watching and ever present. I just find them fascinating. I really just like reading about them, researching them. I find it genuinely interesting. It's a weird fascination of mine, but hey, if it works, it works. So when I saw a video pop up in my feed, I got intrigued. It was from a friend that we've talked to. We've looked at some of his coverage before. The one and only Cyberboy. Okay, Cyberboy, he does a lot of discussions about like GTA 6. He did a lot of coverage of Mind's Eye, which is where we looked at him last. Did a lot of good coverage breaking down how insane a lot of that stuff with Mind's Eye was going to be. But he posted this, which was a video that showed clips of the Titanic. And it's just titled, "This game was going to be insane, but ... So I was like, what is this? And I have to show it to you. So at the outset, I'm going to share the link with all of you so you can go give him a view. And I insist that you go and subscribe to Cyberboy because he does really good stuff. And you'll see this is absolutely wild and will make you lose faith in humanity. The video is titled, "This game was going to be insane, but..." And I think you can all see where this is going if you look at some of these clips for all of 5 seconds, okay? But the fact that this post that's being discussed has 164,000 likes and no doubt millions upon millions of views on Instagram it's just about to make you lose faith in all of humanity, because this is one of the most transparently fake things I've ever seen once you start seeing some of these clips, okay? But people are locking in thinking that it's real. Okay, so let's hear Cyberboy discuss a little bit of it. We're not going to watch like the entire video or anything, but I just want to give you a little taste.
So I was just scrolling social media the other day and I saw an announcement that there's a new Titanic game coming out on PlayStation. And of course, being a huge Titanic nerd and obviously a massive boat fan, subscribe so I can one day get a boat. Thank you. And I was a bit conflicted by it because gamifying a tragedy is a bit weird. So I decided to dive a bit deeper to get a better understanding of what this game's really about. Now, I actually started doing some digging to find some more information because I only really had a couple of images just to flick through and they were cropped in a way that wasn't really that visible. Now, you're probably thinking right now, what's the but? Because there's going to be a but here somewhere. Well,
already, I'll point out some of the things that already stood out to me, okay? AI, yeah, through and through. Everything that they shared about this game is like hilariously fake, okay? So he'll describe some of this as well, but already, like, this is supposed to be the Titanic, a game made on the Titanic. And, you know, I can forgive some historical inaccuracies, like with the upper promenades, with the fact that the life, or the life rafts or life, what's the word I'm looking for? The little boats, whatever. The fact that they don't span the entirety, okay, like I can forgive it. These weird lines on the hull, I don't know what that's supposed to be. Is it lifeboats? That doesn't sound right. It sounds weird. Is it lifeboats? In my brain, it sounds weird. I don't know, whatever. The fact those don't span the whole thing, whatever. The fact smoke's coming out of all 4 of the stacks, even though one of them was a dummy, I can forgive it. It's a video game. What's weird, though, is for this to be a video game about the Titanic, and it doesn't say Titanic. It says... What? Like, if it was a game about the Titanic, you'd think they would make the Titanic label on the ship in the right place, and then also it would be actual human letters. So already this is kind of weird. Next little snippet. Look at this. Okay, here, there's a door handle on the wall for some reason. The handles don't match from door to door. That's weird. Okay. Some of the other things, like these lights are starting to blend in together. So this door has this like candle light next to it. None of the others have it. They all have these lamps. So already there's weird inconsistencies, which you see with AI stuff all the time. With this, similarly, there's all sorts of, like, it looks good in broad strokes, but if you start to look a little bit closer, it like stops making sense. Where this, I think, is supposed to be a door, but it also doesn't have a clear handle or anything. The like things that are supposed to be symmetrical aren't symmetrical, and even just practically, like, why is the bed right up against the cabinet? Like, how are you supposed to get through, and where does this door go? There's weird things like that, but this one is more believable. I'll give him that. Pans forward. This poor man has high heels on and doesn't have arms. Very few of the characters actually have arms, strangely enough. This pose, like you see also this person's walking and they're moving really, really strangely. It's also a really weirdly framed image. Like the more you look at it, the more closely you look at it, the weirder it starts to look. It gets weirder and weirder and weirder. It's also like weird things like, is this supposed to be a piano? What is this object? Is that supposed to be a shadow? It looks like it was starting to be rendered as a piano, and then the AI like kind of lost track of it, and so it just kind of melded into the background. It's really, really weird. Their hands are always the biggest giveaway because the hands aren't realistically moving. There's some weird pipe coming out of nowhere into the ceiling. None of this is level. It's all warped. Like, the closer you look at all of this, the weirder it starts to look. And even if it's not historically accurate, that's one thing. But across the board, it just doesn't look right. Like, they're standing on basically glass as well. Why is it so shiny? You know, like, what is... Yeah, the violin's going into his body. Exactly. So let's hear him describe some more of the stuff that he noticed too.
Probably thinking right now, what's the but? Because there's going to be a but here somewhere. Well, this is a complete and utter scam. The game does not exist. Now, where have I said this before? Well, let's just take a look at the images. Well, firstly, what does that say? Because that certainly doesn't say Titanic on it. The placement and the amount of decks is completely wrong.
It's also, this is a common thing with AI. Like, it loses track once you get to like fine lines. What the hell is even that? Like, it just gives up. It's like, yeah, sure, that's a wire and that's a cable and these connect here. Like, It looks like it's been raised from the bottom of the sea already. Like, it doesn't look right at all. Also, why are there mountains? Where is this sailing?
We can see the two middle funnels smoking. We can see the ship.
Yeah, it's missing a funnel as well. Where did the other funnel go? What are we doing? There's supposed to be 4. One of them was actually a dummy, but there's supposed to be 4 funnels. This only has 3.
Anchor in an ice field, which didn't happen. Now, moving to the next photo, we've got some really extravagant balustrade with some guy with some really warped hands. And we've also got a part of the Titanic that doesn't exist. Then we've got these really weird stairs. I think you can see where this is going. Then in this shot, we've got a handrail from a modern day cruise ship. The Titanic handrails look nothing like this. And we also have these big kind of ropes going over the side of the ship. And this is not what the promenade deck actually looked like. Then in this shot, we've got some ominous glow coming from here. Yep. And in this shot, we've got part of the handrails missing. The handrails aren't uniform. The floorboards are all weird and warped. And in this shot, they've decided to put one of the lights in the middle of some wall art. Also, this is absolutely nothing what the interior of Titanic actually looked like. Now we've got this image, which is supposed to be, I believe, the Grand Staircase. Well, here's a picture of the Grand Staircase on the Olympic, which was pretty much identical to the one in Titanic. They look nothing like each other. Then we've got this shot with some AI warpings happening on the handrail. And then we've got this shot, which looks like a boat that's probably from like the 1500s. This isn't Titanic. And then let's just very quickly move on to the trailer. And don't worry, guys, we will get to the point very shortly. Bear with me. So in the trailer, we've got this shot here. Once again, the ground look nothing like this at all. And you can also see the weird camera warping where they've tried to add like additional effects around the edge of it to make it somewhat more convincing. Like the viewing angle of it, it's not real at all. Then in this shot here, we've got all 4 funnels chuffing out loads of steam. The 4th funnel on the Titanic was actually fake. It wasn't operational. So yeah, that's entirely wrong. This is not...
It was actually, I think it was used for like exhaust from the kitchens. So all of the like, you know, whatever hoods above the stoves and stuff, all of that would exhaust out that 4th funnel, but it would never look like that. I mean, you would never see billowing smoke out of all 4. It would be, you know, 3, and then the 1 would appear clear even though stuff was exhausting.
This is not...
Yeah, it's like ventilation, things like that.
Think like what the cabins actually look like at all. This is actually more inspired by what a modern day cruise ship interior looks like, just from the layout, obviously not the furnishings. Then on this deck here, now someone on Instagram actually pointed this out very correctly. They've actually merged the front of the Titanic with the rear of the Titanic here. So
yeah, you can see this is supposed to be like at the front, like that's the captain's deck up there, where the wheel would have been like right up in there, and that's at the front of the ship. You can actually see it in my Lego version of the Titanic right there. It was not at the back. Like there was not this big gap at the back where there's like a mirrored version of the front of the ship. You know, like
we're basically seeing Titanic in a half. I'm not sure how best to describe that. Then this is great. We have an orchestra playing here with something bizarre happening in the top right hand corner. I wish I could explain what that was. And what looks to be speakers on the ceiling.
Oh, that's a good catch.
And a fire alarm system. That's
Good.
incredible. I don't remember.
Good old 1912 fire alarms with LED lights and strobes.
JBL speakers existing back then, but hey, I could be wrong. Now in this shot, they've only got 3 of the funnel smoking, but the smoke is going into the direction of travel, which if the ship is moving at, you know, like 18 knots, the smoke would be going backwards, not forwards. And then here we've got these people's hands merging into one hand together, unless the guy's removing his hand and passing it to the guy next to him. I'm not sure. And this is apparently what swimming looks like, so that's fun. And then apparently...
Hey, to be fair, that's how I swim. Dog paddle. It upsets my wife because my wife was on like swim team, and she can actually like, she's a monster when it comes to swimming. She'll like go into like the pool with the lap lanes or whatever, and she will go take a breath, and she'll just dive in, and she'll swim the length of the pool and all the way back, and then come up for a breath. I'm like, how dare you? And meanwhile, I'm over there in like a 6-foot section of the pool. Like I'm trying not to drown just in that. So yeah, I told her if we're ever on a boat and it starts sinking, she is saving me. I will not be doing any saving. I'm not that guy. Not a strong swimmer. I only dog paddle.
When the lifeboats were lowered into the water on this version of Titanic.
I can swim, just not well, to be clear. Yeah, to be clear. Very, very clear.
They go down a ramp and slide into the water.
What the hell?
Now, in this shot here, it looks like the Titanic is actually going down stern first, which isn't what happened. Look, you get the idea. You get the idea of what I'm getting at here. This is all just generated with AI. And the problem here is that Sony have allowed this on the PlayStation Store. People are wishlisting this.
Wait, what? Okay, I didn't know this. I got like a couple minutes in. I was like, okay, that's good. That's good. I want to talk about this on stream. I didn't know this is on the PlayStation Store.
It's become a very wish-listed game, even though the game doesn't exist, won't exist, and can't exist. The only really good Titanic kind of simulator, in terms of ones that you can really explore the Titanic in historical accuracy.
Sony, come on.
Is the project by Titanic Honor and Glory.
Yes, Titanic Honor and Glory. This is what I want to talk about, okay? Because I have done an interview with James Penka, who is like one of the head people working on this project. So I want to talk about this. Again, you should watch the entirety of his video. He goes into a lot of detail about his experience with Titanic Honor and Glory, it seems, if we pan through it. So you should watch the full video. Again, go give Cyberboy a sub because I'm so glad he found this. PlayStation needs to get on that because allowing AI slop games to be listed is unbelievable. But that's, I guess that's just where we are. But this thing that he's addressing, Titanic Honor and Glory, okay? What the project is. Basically, it's been in the works since like 2012, but it is a group of guys that are very passionate about the Titanic story and about Titanic just as a piece of history. And so they have for over a decade been painstakingly recreating the entirety of the ship based on historical images, based on the actual blueprints of the ship. They've been going through crazy levels of attention to detail to recreate everything from how the bells looked to the placement of each and every single cable, to the furniture on the deck, and the carpet patterns, the type of leather on the chairs is all carefully considered, the movement of the engines, everything. And then they're putting it into a project. Now it's been converted into Unreal. And so all of this is completely accurate to how it would have appeared on the maiden voyage, all of it, even down to the fabric used on the chairs, all of it. And you can actually download it yourself. Okay, how do you do that? Well, on their website, which TitanicHG.com is how you can find it. This is the website. You can just go to downloads. And when you go to downloads, you can see they have all of the downloads that they've done over the years posted here, but they have demo 401. And demo 401, they have the description of requirements there, and you can download it directly and play it directly and walk around the ship. The whole ship is not done. It's about 50% of the ship is explorable, but you can go down into the boilers. You can walk on the promenade. You can walk on the deck. You can go around the grand staircase. As you can see here, all of this is available. So you can get a feel for the ship yourself and actually explore it yourself. It's really, really interesting. But when I did an interview with one of the developers on this, James Penka, he's actually an actor who got involved with the project initially when it was being set up as a more narrative game, because their initial goal was to get in there and create a game similar to what's being pitched with this fake game, where they wanted you to be able to get on the ship in Belfast, kind of explore the ship, walk around, maybe there'd be some basic questing, but their goal was to eventually have it so you go through the entirety of the sinking. They wanted to have all of the NPCs fully simulated, so if there is a character from the actual story, from the actual event, you could actually follow them, and throughout the journey, they would have actually like tracked through witness statements, through their personal journals or whatever else, their movements through the ship. If it said this guy was in the smoking lounge at this time on this day, you could go there at that time in the game on that day and find that character there. Things like that. Like, they wanted to have it basically be a simulated recreation of the entire event, which is pretty freaking cool. That's pretty cool. Over time, however, it kind of shifted and changed, and they had some genuinely like very good points on how to do that, which is, they bring up some really good points. So I'll lead this in with just a snippet from the interview we did 2 years ago, March of 2023, where we talked about it briefly, and he'll give a little description, I believe, in this first clip of kind of his role within it. Yeah, and his name again is James Penka, and he's been involved in it for a few years at this point, but he was writing some of the script for when it was going to still be a narrative thing, and this is him talking a little bit about some of the difficulties with like the historical recreation of it. It's important to establish those expectations, because over the past decade, and you deal with this day in, day out, it's like people have heard what the original vision was, and then people hear like rumors and twistings of that, and they're like, oh, it's actually gonna be like, you know, a 50-hour campaign. Like people start to get insane ideas of this whole thing.
Yeah.
So it's just important to be very clear, like, no, this is what we're doing. It's built around the fandom, and then also being true to the source material and respectful of the people that lost their lives.
Right, that's a big part of it, because a struggle I had when I first joined the project, and I was writing a lot of the script for that story mode. I had written as far up to boarding Titanic, so there was this long epilogue that took place in London and Southampton, and then you boarded Titanic, and that's where I stopped, because that's where things would get really interesting. And I was just looking ahead to the sinking, and I'm thinking, how are we gonna sink the ship with 2,200 NPCs? The whole point is, like, you could pick Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, and just follow him around and see what he did. And our plan was to base his movements off of where he was seen, and there's no doubt this would help historically with research and all that. But like, do we just show people drowning? Do we show people freezing to death? Do we have children on board? Because there were children, and a lot of them died. It's not a positive thing. So our focus has definitely been not that. And to focus on the ship and the stories, absolutely. There's tragic stories, but in a lot of ways, reading them or hearing them spoken by the survivors themselves is plenty in terms of how close you actually want to get to the deaths of 1,500 people.
Right. And that's, I can only imagine how difficult it is, because like if you want to recreate the ship to allow people to explore it and appreciate it for its historical value, and because people are just interested in it, that's one thing. But when you're like, we want to recreate the sinking, okay, and we want to turn it into a video game, okay, that's also like, that's a little trickier, that's harder to do. And how do you do that respectfully? Because when it's like, if it was an 8-bit game, I think people can kind of disconnect enough and it's whatever. But when it is a photorealistic recreation down to like the inch of the Titanic, it's like their version of the Titanic has been used in all sorts of documentaries. They've been used in like when the Titan sub went down, and all of these different outlets wanted to use footage of the Titanic to kind of talk about the Titan sub and everything. They used all sorts of clips from their project because it's such an accurate recreation of the ship. And it's still, by the way, it's still in the works. Like these posts are just from a few days ago, where they're going through and they're making sure that the beams within the actual superstructure of the ship are accurate to the blueprints and to the plans. They're making sure like the bolts and everything and the engravings on each of these objects are properly set. They want to make sure that the actual, whatever you call this, like the brackets for some of the shelves are accurate to the pictures that they have from when the ship was built or the sister ships were built. Like, it's absolutely crazy the level of detail they're going to. It's outrageous. Like, it's crazy. It's crazy. Like, these are the things they're working with to recreate it. It's crazy. Point is, they're still working on it actively, and if you want to support them, you can do that through their Patreon, because they're still actively working on it, you know, and they're making progress. It's just, as you can imagine, a huge undertaking to recreate a massive ship with scattered historical records and things. But when you're doing that, it kind of becomes too real, and then recreating the actual tragedy in like animated form and then gamifying it like in terms of gameplay, it gets really tricky. It gets really tricky. So it's very confusing and difficult to juggle the very real historical aspect of the syncing, while also giving people the chance to like explore the ship in a quote unquote fun way. So instead they've shifted away and they're just recreating the ship, and their goal is to provide it to people for historical appreciation's sake, for preservation's sake, and let people actually see it and explore it. But they're not going to try to gamify it. They're not going to do like, you know, get to the lifeboat before it's too late. You have a 2-minute countdown while you race through the stairwells. Like, they're not doing that. They're going to instead just focus on recreating it for the sake of the retelling the story and letting the story live on. But it's very, very fascinating. And if you want an actual Titanic something to sink your teeth into, this is the project to support and to check out. It is fascinating, and they've done a phenomenal job, and I can't wait for them to continue making more progress. Don't bother wishlisting the PlayStation game. It is not real. It is AI slop. So hate to be the bearer of bad news, but again, shout out Cyberboy for doing the great video finding this made up game. I'm thoroughly entertained that it's a thing. I had no idea, and I didn't know before we started talking about this that that it was also like on the PlayStation Store. That's crazy. But anyway.
He took my thing. Red flag, red flag.
16 times the detail.
The Steam client beta was updated earlier this week with improved performance monitoring, which is super cool. I saw the notification for this, but I didn't have a ton of time to look into it because this week was very busy for me. The old in-game FPS counter.
Should we tell them what you were doing this week? Is that a thing?
I can tell them the one, but I don't know if... Do we want to announce that one?
We shot Scrapyard Wars 10.
We did.
It was epic.
The premise was genuinely amazing.
Okay, anyway, carry on.
Anyways, yeah, the Steam client beta was updated earlier this week with improved performance monitoring. The old in-game FPS counter has been updated into the in-game overlay performance monitor. Okay. Adding more detailed information about frame rates, frame generation, CPU and GPU performance, and more. Try it yourself by enabling the client beta by going to settings and then in-game. In other Steam news, Valve has introduced what it says are first of many accessibility tools. This is other stuff.
Why don't we talk about this first?
Let's do that.
So you think that this is a really big deal, and I don't necessarily disagree, but I want to hear your take about how big of a deal it is that they have more detailed information about frame gen specifically, I think is what you were sort of focused on.
Again, I haven't personally actually dove into this yet. I'm hoping it also has frame time stuff. But I just really, like back in the day, you know, needing to get fraps and all these other kind of things to figure out what the heck was going on. Having this built into Steam is really cool. And having a tool built into Steam where you can learn more about what's happening to your system. Because like there's all these videos and people talking about trying to figure out like, oh, like what is the impact? Why does my game feel kind of weird right now?
Yeah.
Like people playing competitive shooters, dealing with frame gen stuff. I'm not necessarily like I said, I don't necessarily want the fight. I don't actually really care so much about the fake frames versus real frames war. The part of that I do care about is when it's highly misrepresented. And we've seen that a lot in like the NVIDIA presentations and stuff.
Right.
But the technology by itself is super cool in the right scenarios.
Why does marketing have to ruin everything?
It's just marketed horribly because it's false promises, really. It's a cool tech on its own.
Yeah. Even multi-frame gen. Like
it's a cool tech on its own.
It has a place and it has a purpose.
Cinematic single player games.
Yeah, as long as they're not too fast paced.
Yep, sometimes it's a problem.
And as long as the base performance is enough.
But tools like this make it so that you can turn it on, see how many fake frames are happening, evaluate the game, play it a little bit, see how it feels, dial things in. Like it's another cool, useful tool. I love these types of things. I love like tools for nerds. What does Google call it?
Stats for geeks or
stats
for nerds.
Stats for nerds. Like I love stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
You give me more tools, I'm going to poke around, I'm going to try things. I'm excited to just see with ease on anyone's system what's kind of going on. Like if somebody's like, oh yeah, I'm trying to play this game, but like aiming feels sluggish for some reason, or like I feel like I'm on target, I'm not hitting people or whatever. We can now we have another tool to try to evaluate.
Right.
You can also do screen record and slow it down to see maybe you just suck.
That's possible.
but those tools already exist. So yeah,
have you tried getting good?
I think this is sweet.
We actually have a direct appeal to Valve. Valve does so much cool stuff that just generally makes gamers' lives better and easier. And there's one tool that I feel they have neglected over a long period of time that I really want to see them update. We have a new edition of the most average PC build coming. So are you familiar with the series?
I think so.
This is number 3 or 4. I can't remember. But it's updated to 2025's version, or a recent 2025 release of the Steam Hardware Survey. And the Steam Hardware Survey is an invaluable tool for determining what exactly it is that gamers have in their systems. It does a great job both for people who are configuring gaming PCs to be able to look through and figure out, okay, what's the norm? What should I kind of be targeting to play games that developers are likely to be building their games around? And then it's also great for developers because it gives them a really great idea, especially over time, of what the changing trends are in hardware configurations out there, so that as they're developing their games and their performance targets, they know what kind of hardware that Steam gamers have. And while it does a pretty good job of the granularity of certain components, like GPUs, for instance, you can see exactly which model of GPU in many cases. Sometimes the mobile ones kind of get mixed in, but minor stuff, For things like CPUs, they just tell you how many cores and what clock speed range. We're talking like net burst era of information here. So one of the examples that Elijah gives in the video is he goes, well, okay, 6 cores clocked between this and this. That could either be this 12th gen CPU or this Xeon from 10 years ago. They literally both fit the bill. We're going to assume it's more like the new one, but come on.
Still can't know.
This is the point we're trying to make. And some of the information they have on monitors, for instance, really good, really useful. We know what resolution people are running. That's great. What refresh rate are they running? As a game developer, I might want to know that. As a gamer who's just, trying to figure out the competition out there, I might want to know, hey, am I falling behind a little bit right now because I'm one of the only people still running a 60 hertz monitor? Which, to be clear, that's not the case, but that it is changing. High refresh rate monitors are becoming more prevalent. How prevalent? I don't know.
Yeah, it would be nice to know.
If the Valve Hardware Survey had it in there, then that would be great. And it for us in the media, it also helps us to tailor our content to whatever people are most likely to be having questions about. As there's a big transition to 1440p right now.
Yep.
So, okay, we're looking at that going, all right, so we should do like a 1440p monitors buying guide or whatever the case may be. The Steam Hardware Survey is an invaluable tool. It's one that they publish for free for everybody to use.
Which is wild.
Which is great, but also self-serving because it's to help developers and gamers meet together on Steam. So make it better. There's some key ways that the Steam Hardware Survey needs to improve, and so we kind of appeal to Valve's generosity, I guess, because that's the only reason they have to do anything now that they're just a money printing machine, and ask them to bestow upon us mere mortals a better version of the Hardware Survey. And I don't remember how we got on the subject.
I think you know a couple people there.
I do, but they're Valve people, so they're great and do whatever the they want, I think.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I know their company's super flat, and there's these rumors that I've heard that you can kind of work on whatever, which is clearly not 100% true, or else nothing would ever happen.
Yeah, I have contacts there that are clearly in a role.
Yeah.
They have a job title and stuff.
And customer support tickets are still answered.
Yeah.
And if that was purely elective, just no one's ever going to do it. So
are you sure? I love answering customer support tickets.
Okay, sure.
I used to pitch in when things were really busy at NCIX.
I still do.
Yeah, fair enough.
Part of life. I don't exactly love it, but but on that dark day when Gaben's light finally fades. What do you think's going to happen?
I have no
not-
idea.
I think a lot of the reasons why Valve has been so based, and I sometimes bark at their 30% and stuff like that, but they have overall
Been a force for good
absolutely
for the most part.
yeah. They take a lot of the pie.
Yeah, I think
but they do good stuff with it.
I do think that Gaben just like not needing any more super yachts is a big part of why they just don't bother to try to squeeze more money.
Yeah.
Like nothing, as far as I can tell, nothing prevents Valve from upping their cut to 35%.
But not even that. Like
Or 50.
You look at the handheld market, and they could have just gone with Windows, but they didn't.
Yeah.
And they did a ton of work in order to not. And like you look at what's happening with Bazite and stuff now, and it's like, wow, they are really pushing this forward in a way that nobody has. I don't know. They do cool stuff. I wish they made more games still. I know people talk about Half-Life all the time, but like, give me another Portal.
I don't know.
I'd enjoy another Portal.
I'd play it, but
It's co-op.
I loved
I
the
could play
heck
with
out
my
of
dad.
Portal 1, and I felt like Portal 2 was rehashing a lot of the same territory. I don't see what Portal 3 would bring to the table.
More co-op.
Yeah, okay.
More co-op. Yeah.
Anyway,
I don't know.
in other news, Valve is introducing what it says are the first of many accessibility tools to Steam and SteamOS. Players using Big Picture and SteamOS will get a text size slider, high contrast mode, a reduce motion toggle to disable some animations and screen transition effects, and in addition, SteamOS devices, so Steam Deck and Legion OS, for now, will gain a customizable screen reader, a color filter that affects both the Steam UI and in-game graphics, and they can choose between... and you can find all this in the new accessibility tab in your Steam settings.
I'm really surprised they didn't already have like high contrast mode and stuff.
Classic Valve. The only thing that's surprising about them being based is that they weren't already that based.
You thought it was gone. You thought it was dead. You thought it was forgotten. But no, my friends, I'm here to tell you a game we talked about a lot last year, a game we were passionately focused on, has made a return. That's right. That's right, Uniform. Concord's back. This is insane. As you know, Concord released last August, and it existed for all of, I believe it was 11 or 12 days. Which, fun fact. Fun fact. A lifespan of a common housefly is 28 days. So a literal fly outlived Concord, which is pretty freaking hilarious. But the reason that's significant is because they shut the game down and they pulled it from sale, refunded everybody, and refused to do anything. They just canned it. They shut down the studio. They moved on, and the game has just been gone. It's technically lost media at this point, even though people still have it installed on their consoles. I've not uninstalled it yet. It feels weird too, but I can't launch it. So we have the game, but you can't play it. It's gone. It's just in the wind. So we all just kind of accepted that Concord was dead and buried, and now was lost to time. Lost to time. But guess what? It's back. A pre-release build of Concord has leaked. It's dated roughly around November of 2023. So the build was compiled roughly 9 months before the game's actual release and subsequent death. VGC says that they have downloaded the build and can confirm that it appears to be authentic. Now, I will be honest, I have tried to find a copy of this build. I have yet to find an actual copy of it, but I am curious whether I could find it. And you'll see it's not like you can play the game with this build, but we'll get there. Loading the game displays a login screen that can't be bypassed. I imagine that you can get in through like mods and stuff. Somebody would be able to find their way through a back door, but they say, however, the build's uploader has included an INI file, which enables a developer menu. When this is applied, the game loads directly into, to select a free gunner screen. So you can select a free gunner, which yes, they were free gunners. I don't know what it is about free gunner or runners. Like Marathon has runners, they have free gunners. Maybe Fair Games is going to have bummers. I don't know. It's like, why does everybody have to have a similar name for characters? But anyway, from here, it appears the player can go no further because no free gunners appear on the screen, meaning nobody can be selected. It is at least possible, however, to enter a pause screen and from there access the main menu where numerous screens can be viewed. This includes a partially completed galactic guide, which provides information on the galaxy's various planets, and a crew section where information on the game's 16 playable characters and their variant outfits can be found. It also includes a job board, which just has placeholder text, and a store option, which doesn't do anything, as well as a setting menu containing the developer options such as developer matchmaking and a style guide for the game's various fonts. As you can see, this particular version has like cartoon renders of each of the characters. You can select them. They have sort of a work in progress version of the character with place-holding hair that kind of looks like it was taken out of a cake mold. But they also have the abilities and stuff described over on the side as well. And shout out to this poor dev who has leveled up to 257. They played a lot of this. Galactic Guide, this gives you a little idea of the breakdown of everything. I'm sure these would have eventually become playable maps, years down the road, but this, I believe, is the spot that was shown in the cinematic trailer as well. So you can see that this is the select screen. They were saying that you can't actually select any characters in, but you can then get to the main menu by backing out. You can see some of the dev codes and stuff, all of that. Given the game's online requirement, however, it doesn't currently seem that it's possible to get beyond these screens or choose a free gunner to play the game, meaning that unless enthusiasts found a way to get the build running a proper game, these unfinished menus are all the build provides. Just 2 weeks after its release last August, Sony announced plans to take Concord offline, pull the game from sale, offer refunds to all players who bought it, citing poor reception, blah, 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 blah. At the time, Sony said it would explore the possibility of bringing back the game in a revised form. However, a month later, Herman Hulst confirmed the company had decided not to move forward with the title and instead just can it. The developer was subsequently closed, with Herman Hulst saying Sony would work to find placement for some of those impacted with our global community of studios where possible. Of course, they were founded in 2018, acquired by Sony in 2023. They released Concord in 2024, and it was a total dumpster fire that now will live in our hearts forever. But isn't this kind of remarkable? It's quite possible. Quite possible that some very capable modders and enthusiasts could find ways to set up, I don't know if you could do it through LAN or maybe, host a private server, off of your own computer. I don't know. I'm not a programmist. Okay. It's not my talent, not my suite of skills, but it's possible in theory, if they don't get like copyright struck into oblivion, that people could actually get this game working once more. And it does make me wonder how this happened, like how this leak hit. And like I said, I haven't been able to find the original source for where this leak came from. It's possible it was out there since like before Concord happened. But it's also quite possible that like a developer had this build on a laptop or something and just decided to upload it anonymously to like a 4chan type place just to put it out into the universe and be like, we worked on this for years, so here's this, so at least people can mess with it. That type of thing has happened before. That type of thing has happened before. Yeah, I know it's programmer. Yeah, yeah, I know it's programmer. But yeah, it's very curious to me how this happened, but I'm guessing it probably was somebody on the team that decided to just toss it out there just to give a little something to the public. give a little something. I've tried to find this, but most of these articles are like they're showing like the articles describing the leak, but they're not actually showing how to download it or where to find it. So I don't know if you guys can find a copy of it, maybe link it in the Discord or something, and then we can check it out, because I'm honestly kind of curious. What a horrible person leaking that. Yes, spreading it into the world. Well, it's similar to another thing that happened where like years ago there was a guy that made a fan recreation of PT. Eventually it got like copyright struck and they had to take it down. Radius Gordello, yeah. And it looks like this guy actually re-uploaded it and has allowed people to re-download it, which is good, because I had it downloaded from years and years and years ago when he first put it out there, and he recreated asset for asset, like little bitty detail to little bitty detail, the entirety of PT. We've actually played it on stream before, and it's really good, but it was copyright struck and they were forced to like shut down their website distributing it. But it looks like me and some other people as well have actually downloaded it and kept it, you know, locked away on our computers or whatever. And people have done this, like re-uploaded it.
$50 through Super Chat. What game are we more excited for? Fair game or marathon?
What game am I more excited for? Fair game or marathon? Excited is a strong word. That's a strong word. I honestly don't know. I don't know. I've played marathon, like at the whatever preview event, alpha preview, whatever. And I had a decent time with marathon. I even had fun, and I said after the event, I'll play more. I want to play more. And I played more, but then like after another few hours, I was like, I'm good. You know, so for me, marathon was a game I'd kind of seen everything it had to offer, in my view, after like 10 hours, you know, like just, I was good. I was good. With fair game $, it's possible that that game is actually like really, really good, and it's just been like marketed really, really poorly. It's also possible it's totally mediocre. It seems like there was a playtest that was leaked and rumored and discussed or whatever. I think Insider Gaming reported on it. And then after that, Jade Raymond was booted out, of course, but the playtest apparently didn't go super well for them. So I don't know. I just think like both of them are games, it seems, that nobody really asked for, and that are not good enough to justify their existence and the crazy amounts of money that's been poured into it. So we'll see. We'll see. You know, as time goes by, maybe they'll put something out and it'll blow us away and amaze us. But as of right now, it doesn't seem that exciting or compelling. Arc Raiders also played that, and I get why people are really thrilled for that. That's one to be excited for, you know. But as for right now, like marathon or fair games, there's not much reason to be excited for either. I think there is reason to be excited for Arc Raiders, but they haven't really given us a lot to be excited about for everything else. Yeah, it's dead. It's possible. It's possible. I don't know what their plan is, but it's definitely possible that they're just going to choose to walk away from it. The fact that they booted out the studio founder is not good. John the Tank, thank you for the 10. I'm starting to not understand the continued interest in Concord. Do people still talk about it because of the level of failure it was, or because of it being an internet meme now? I think both. The reason Concord failed is multifaceted, but I've said this before. Sometimes gamers pile onto a game not because of what it is, but because of what it represents. And I think in the case of Concord, it was both, which is why it was such a particularly destructive mix. Because Concord represented, and its failure represented, a broader frustration within the community with regard to like Sony's overall direction this generation, with a sort of disregard for what people really, really wanted, which was like, you know, single player high quality games. And instead they're putting all this money and effort into these like Overwatch kind of spin-off rip-off games. And so I think part of it was that what it represented, it paired with the culture war stuff, because it also had really hilariously bad character designs and it was very clear what they were doing. It paired next to Suicide Squad, which had similar issues. It was also paired with like the Sweet Baby Inc. stuff that was going on at the time and was going viral. So it was just like a perfect storm of a lot of things people were upset about all at the same time. And then you tack onto it that it's just not a particularly good game and you're screwed. You're screwed. So I think its failure started with that, and now it's just kind of a meme, and that's part of the reason why people still talk about it. And it's just fascinating. People like watching a dumpster fire. People like still talking about Starfield every once in a while. And, for some games, it is just simply because it's a meme. And it's like, oh, yeah, what did happen with that? They're just curious,
He took my thing.
my pipe be? Garfield?
When I was 18 years old, I saw for the first time in my life, I saw a vision of clarity. I saw a comic strip, a 3-panel comic strip that, though simple as it seemed, changed me, changed my being, changed who I am, made me who I am, enlightened me. The strip, Garfield. The comic strip was new, no more than maybe a month and a half since inception, since coming into existence. And there it was before me in print. I saw it, a comic strip. What was it called? Garfield. The story here is of a man, a plain man. He is John, but he is more than that. I will get to this later. But first, let us just say he is John, a plain man. And then there is a cat, Garfield. This is the nature of the world here. When I see the world, the politics, the future, the satellites in space, and the people who put them there, you can look at everything as a man and a cat. Two beings in harmony and at war. So this strip I saw about this man, John, and the cat, Garfield, you see, yes, it is about everything. This little comic is, oh, lo and behold, not so little anymore. So yes, when I was 18, I saw this comic, and it hit me all at once, its power. I clipped it, and every day I looked at it, and I said, okay, let me look at this here. What is this doing to me? Why is this so powerful? John Arbuckle, he sits here, legs crossed, comfortable in his home, and he reads his newspaper. The news of the world, perhaps. And then he extends his fingers lightly, delicately. He taps his fingers on an end table and he feels for something. What is it? It is something he needs, but it is not there. And then he looks up, slightly cockeyed, and he thinks. His newspaper in his lap now, and he thinks this. Now where could my pipe be? This. I always come to this because I was a young man. I'm older now. And I still don't have the secrets, the answers. So this question still rings true. John looks up and he thinks, now where could my pipe be? And then it happens. You see it. You see, it's almost like divine intervention. Suddenly, it is there and it overpowers you. A cat is smoking a pipe. It is the man's pipe. It's John's pipe. But the cat, this cat Garfield, is smoking the pipe. And from afar and from someplace near but not clear, near but not clear, the man calls out. John calls out. He is shocked. Garfield, he shouts. Garfield, the cat's name. But let's take a step back. Let us examine this from all sides, all perspectives. And when I first came across this comic strip, I was at my father's house. The newspaper had arrived and I picked it up for him and brought it inside. I organized his sections for him and then, yes, the comic strips section fell out from somewhere in the middle and landed on the kitchen floor. I picked up the paper pages and saw up somewhere near the top of this strip. And just like John, I too was wearing an aquamarine shirt. So I thought, interesting. I'll have to see to this later. I snipped out the little comic and held onto it. And 5 days later, I re-examined. And it gripped me. I needed to find out more about this. The information I had was minimal, but enough. An orange cat named Garfield. Okay, that seemed to be the linchpin of this whole operation. And yes, another clue, a signature in the bottom right corner, a man's name, Jim Davis. Yes, I am onto it for sure. So, 1, Garfield, orange cat. And 2, Jim Davis, the creator of this cat. And that curiously plain man. I did not know at the time that his name was John. The strip, you see, had no mention of this man's name, and I'd never seen it before. But I had these clues. Jim Davis, Garfield. And then I saw more. I spotted the tiny copyright mark in the upper left corner. Copyright 1978 to... what is this? Copyright belongs to a Pause Incorporated. I used the local library and mail services to track down the information I was looking for. Jim Davis, a cartoonist, had created a comic strip about a cat, Garfield, and a man, John Arbuckle. Well, from that point on, I made sure I read the Garfield comic strips, but as I read each one, as each day passed, the strips seemed to resonate with me less and less. I sent letters to Paws Incorporated, long letters, pages upon pages, asking if Mr. Jim Davis could somehow publish just the one comic over and over again. It would be meditative, I wrote. The strength of that. Could you imagine? But no response. The strips lost their power, and eventually I stopped reading, but I did not want my perceptions diluted, so I vowed to read the pipe strip over and over again. That is what I called it, the pipe strip. The pipe strip. Everything about it is perfect. I can only describe it as a miracle creation. Something came together. The elements aligned. It's like the comets, the cosmic orchestra that is up there over your head. The immense, enormous void is working all for one thing, to tell you one thing. Gas and rock and purity and nothing. I will say this. When I see the pipe strip, and I mean every single time I look at the lines, the colors, the shapes that make up the 3-panel comic, I see perfection. Do I find perfection in many things? Some things, I would say. Some things are perfect, and this is one of them. I can look at the little tuft of hair on John Arbuckle's head. It is the perfect shade. The purple pipe in Garfield's mouth. How could a mere mortal even make this? I have a theory about Jim Davis. After copious research, and yes, of course, now we have the internet and this information is all readily available, but Jim Davis, he used his life experiences to influence his comic. And like I mentioned before, none of them seem to have the weight of the pipe strip. But you have to wonder about the man who is able to even just once create the perfect form, a literally flawless execution of art, brilliance. Just isn't a word. I think there's a spiritual element at work. I've seen my share of bad times, and when you have something, well, it's just emotions and neurons in your brain, but something tells you that it's the truth. Truth's radiant light. Garfield the cat? Neurons in my brain. It's harmony, you see. John and Garfield. It's truly harmony, like a continuous, looping, everlasting harmony. The lavender chair, the brown end table, the salmon-colored wall, the forest green carpet, and Garfield is hunched, perched, perhaps with the pipe stuck firmly between his jowls. His tail curls around. It's more than shapes, too, because Okay, stay with me. I've done this experiment several times. You take the strip. You trace only the basic elements. You can do anything. You can simplify the shapes down to just blobs, just outlines, but it still makes sense. You can replace the blobs with magazine cutouts of other things. Replace John Arbuckle with a car parked in a driveway sideways. Cut that out of the magazine, stick it in. Replace him there in the second panel with a food processor. Okay. And then we put a picture of the planet in the third panel over Garfield. It still works. These are universal proportions. I don't know how best to explain why it works. I've studied the pipe strip and analyzed John and Garfield's proportions against several universal mathematical constants. E, pi, the golden ratio, the Feigenbaum constants, and so on. And it's surprising, scary even, how things align. You can take just tiny pieces of the pipe strip, for instance. Take John's elbow from the second panel. And take that and project it back over John's entire shape in the second panel, and you'll see a near-perfect Fibonacci sequence emerge. It's eerie to me. It makes you wonder if you are in the presence of a deity, if there is some larger hand at work. There's no doubt in my mind that Jim Davis is a smart man. Jim Davis is capable of anything, to me. He is remarkable. But this is so far beyond that. I think we might see that this work of art is revered and respected in years to come. Jim Davis is possibly a new master of the craft, a genius of the eye. They very well may say the same things about Jim Davis in 500 years that we say about the great philosophical and artistic masters from centuries ago. Jim Davis is a modern-day Socrates or Da Vinci, mixing both striking visual beauty with classical, daring, unheard-of intellect. Look, he combines these things to make profoundly simple expressions. This strip is his masterpiece. The pipe strip is his masterpiece. And it is a masterpiece and a marvel. I often look at Garfield's particular pose in this strip. He is poised and statuesque, and his cat stare is reminiscent of the fiery gazes often found in religious iconography. But still, his eyes are playful, lying somewhere between the solemn father's expression in Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son and the coy smirk of Da Vinci's St. John the Baptist. His ears stick up, signifying a peaked readiness. It's as if he could at any moment pounce. He is, after all, close relative and descendant of the mighty jungle cats of Africa that could leap after prey. You could see the power drawn into Garfield's hindquarters, powerful haunches indeed. The third panel. And I'm just saying this now, this is just coming to me now. The third panel of the pipe strip is essentially a microcosm for the entire strip itself. All the power dynamics, the struggle for superiority, right? Who has the pipe? Where is the pipe? All of that is drawn, built, layered into Garfield's iconic pose here. You can see it in the curl of his tail. Garfield's ear whiskers stick up on end, the smoke billows upward, drawing the eye upward. Increasing scope. I'm just amazed, really, that after 33 years of reading and analyzing the same comic strip, I'm able to find new dimensions. It's a testament to the work. For 6 years, I delved into tobacco research because, can a cat smoke? This is a metaphysical question. Yes. Can any cat smoke? Do we know? Can just Garfield smoke? The research says no. Nicotine poisoning can kill animals, especially household pets. All it takes is the nicotine found in as little as a single cigarette. Surely John's pipe holds a substantial amount of tobacco. And it is true that pets living in the homes of smokers are nearly 25% more likely to develop some form of cancer, most likely due to secondhand smoke. But these are facts of smoking and its tolls on our world. But after visiting 2 tobacco processing plants in Virginia and the Philip Morris cigarette manufacturing facility, I came no closer to cracking the meaning. I was looking for any insight. A detective of a homicide case has to look at every angle. So I'm always taking apart the pipe strip. I focused on every minutia, every detail of this strip. John Arbuckle's clothing, I have replicas. I'm an expert in textiles. So you see, this smoking thing was a hang-up for me. What was the statement here? Until... And this is key. This is the breakthrough. The pipe is not a pipe, really. Obviously, there is symbolism at work here. I saw that from the beginning, and I looked at the literal aspects of the strip to gain insight into the metaphors at play. I worked at a newspaper printing press for 18 months in the late 1980s. I was learning the literal to inform the gestural, the subliteral, the in-between. John reading the newspaper means so much more than just John reading the newspaper. But how could you ever hope to decipher the puzzle without knowing everything there is to know about newspapers? Okay, for example, John holds his paper up with his left hand, thumb gripping the interior. I learned that this particular grip here is the newspaper grip of 19th century aristocrats. And this aristocrat grip was a point of contention that influenced the decision to move forward with prohibition in the United States in the early 20th century. So John's hand position is much more than that. It is a comment on class war and the resulting reactionary culture. But I didn't know about the aristocratic newspaper grip until I came across some microfiche archives at the printing press. It's about information. You have to take it apart. And the breakthrough on a smoking cat came late. Just 8 years ago, actually. Smoking cat is an industry term. It's what the smoking industry calls a tattletale teenager who tells on his friends after they've all tried smoking for the first time. And it is actually a foreign translation, bastardization of the term smoking rat. But the phrase was confused when secret documents went back and forth between China and America. These documents are still secret. And the only reason I know about the term is because I know a man, my friend. Let's call him Timothy. Yes, it's a fake name for his protection. Timothy worked for Philip Morris for 16 years, and he had seen the documents. When he told me, it was an aha moment. And he said, but how? How could this cartoonist, Jim Davis, know about this obscure term from the mid-70s used exclusively by a few cigarette companies? This is still a mystery to me. But I connect the dots by noting Jim Davis's childhood experiences on a farm. He must have seen something. What could it be? Timothy went on to tell me there was one particular smoking cat, a boy from, yes, Indiana. A boy named Ernie Barguckle, who became a thorn in the side of the tobacco companies for a couple years. He did more than tattle to his parents. He and his family took legal action, and they eventually received a huge settlement payout. But that name is too similar. Ernie Barguckle. John Arbuckle. Jim Davis must have used this. But there's more here. Ernie Barguckle spent nearly half of that settlement money on experimental medical procedures to cure his impotence. He was impotent. So he was a smoking cat with a metaphorical pipe that did not work. Are you starting to see the layers here? This is exciting stuff. You start to get a whole picture here, and it informs the work. It's just remarkable. Jim Davis took these raw ideas, these pieces, and he transformed them into smart social commentary that is also ravishingly beautiful. I have cried. I've cried, I've cried. I've cried over this piece. It just gets into my soul. I try to explain this to people. I have the newspaper articles about Ernie Barguckle. People have fought me on this. They don't see it, or they are close-minded. How can a comic strip about a cat smoking a pipe mean any more than that? But it is more. And when I feel spiritual or start to think existentially, I still see this comic. Here is something from 1981 that I wrote in thinking about the implications of this trip. This is just an excerpt here. There's more before and after, but this part is the essence to me. If a comic about a cat smoking a pipe can be the only thing in the universe, then maybe this is the strongest evidence for that. Many of you say, "Oh, but I am not blind. I have never been blind." But when you truly see, you will understand just how truly blind you once were to even think it right to say you were not blind. What does a blind man see? Blackness, darkness, blankness, black darkness, dark blankness, the absence of things, quite literally no thing, no things, nothing, nothings. So you see nothing, and I bring you into the light. A cat has your pipe. You've been blind, do you understand this? The cat has your pipe. You can't fully immerse yourself. You don't have the light. You don't have the radiance, the radical light, the radically radiant light of truth and truth's belonging love and nature of light and loving truthful radiance. So don't be bold and make bold statements. I know of you. The cat has your pipe. The cat has your pipe. Remember that. That writing, well, it's kind of rough. Kind of an early 80s feel. And I see that, but I'm still proud of it. Sometimes I imagine that it is the editorial column in the newspaper John Arbuckle is reading. It's an exercise in recursion. It's like a vortex opens up. It's like you hold two mirrors up to each other. One is reality and the other is a cartoon strip. Let's see here. Oh yes, I must bring this up because I think surely Jim Davis is again speaking on multiple levels by including the details set before us in the comic. Notice the glimpse of John Arbuckle's foot in the first panel. The size of the shoe would indicate that maybe the man just has small feet. But a deeper investigation takes us to the foot-binding rituals of certain Asian cultures. Inflicted usually on women for the desire of men, this practice was incredibly painful and crippling. Aha! Mr. Davis is here presenting us with a man, or rather, man, who engages in foot-binding, a body modification for women on top of being without his pipe or impotent. This is a man facing extreme inner turmoil. The panels tell that story subconsciously. Notice the background wall shading of the first panel points inward toward John in the second panel. And the sharp, tapered end of the purple pipe in the third frame also points at John in the second panel, inward. The eye is drawn to the center panel. You can connect these points and draw a triangle across the panels, and this triangle will align with the reoriented points of John's collar. This is majestic artwork. And to uncover this hidden order is bliss like I've never known. Comfort in an empty world. I can't help but read the thought bubble again and again. Now where could my pipe be? Now where could my pipe be? It is a profound question. Why am I here? What is my purpose? It is reflection and self-examination here. It is facing the dust, the misery of a cold, careless universe. You can feel the weight of it. Now where could my pipe be? One imagines the author Jim Davis nearly teetering on the edge of insanity. His rationality, his lucidity hovering over the void. And he seeks the truth. You can see it in the line quality of the drawings, the thoughtful, controlled outlines mixed with the occasional chaotic scribbles that lurk in the shadows and Garfield's dark stripes. It's almost as if Garfield is chaos himself. Yes, he is the embodiment of chaos, disorder, hatred, fear, thievery, death, destruction, desolation. These are the things Garfield represents. He stole the pipe. He sits with his back to John Garfield. Garfield, this chaos cat Garfield has turned his back on everything, everyone. One recalls the great existential forces in literature. Camus, Meursault, Kafka's Gregor Samsa, or Sartre's Antoine Roquentin. Garfield the cat sees the hopelessness of life, which This is why Jim Davis has chosen smoking. It represents a recklessness, a disregard for what some would define as the beauty of life. Garfield may die from the nicotine. He may not. He defies life. He sits defiant, saying nothing, but looking as if he could say, "Then let me die." It does not matter. It does not matter. And we are faced with this. Could John behave the same? Is John the glimmer of hope? He seems to be unsure. Again, his question. Now, where could my pipe be? Indicates that he is wrestling with his own existence. The center panel centers the issue, and again, this harkens to many of the great religious works of art. I'm talking about the pipe strip in relation to religion. It's interesting to assign the roles of God and anti-God, or as many know him to be the devil, or on a much larger scale, simply the forces of good and evil. Garfield, the thief cat, evil and malicious. He is the devil, placed to the right. And note the two forms of John. The John on the left, still innocent, still draped in the delight of the lack of knowledge. He is the humans in the Garden of Eden. He feels for his pipe, but he has yet to eat from the tree. And Garfield, the sinister serpent. And notice how Jim Davis has framed this. The center John is locked in a struggle between his innocence and knowledge of the truth, knowledge of the existence of evil. It is stunning. The great struggle, the struggle that transcends time. And Jim Davis floats over all of this as creator, God of sorts, in his own right. And he presents this cautionary message to us all. It is as if he is speaking from high, and he is saying unto our awaiting ears, "Where will you be when the cat reveals himself?" I can tell you where you'll be. You will have a choice. You can face endless suffering and eternal misery. You can be forced and beaten down with barbarians who claw at each other just for a view of salvation. They'll tear your eyeballs out and rip your gizzards from end to end. They worship this cat, this false idol, this evil, horrible cat. Do not be seduced by the cat in the pipe. Garfield, thy name is a mark of the demons of hell. Something like this. And to those listening, it is a stark reminder to follow the path of the first panel, John. Be humble, be grateful. Honor the law and honor thyself. Be true and be good, and no harm will come to you. Pray for salvation, it will be granted unto you. Be like John Arbuckle as he lowers his head. Be like John Arbuckle as he lowers his paper, as he turns his head. Bow with John Arbuckle and praise unto the creator, Jim Davis, and banish Demon Garfield from your life. So what is all this? What am I saying? Aha. What does all this mean? Why is this one comic strip so important to me? And why do I feel the need to share this? Obligation. I have an obligation to you all. This is redemption. This is a belief in redemption, a sacrifice of all the obvious trappings of this false modern life. Look at the simplicity in this strip, in the pipe strip. Look at the simple clothes John wears. Look at his simple, basic furniture. No adornments on the wall. Even the very pipe his cat Garfield stole, it is a plain, modest pipe. And I have adapted this way of life. It speaks to me. In our times, well, you don't need me to point out the hyperbole of our times. You have children being born 8 or 9 at a time. You have more money spent on a single Hollywood movie than some nations can spend feeding their starving people. Torture, distrust. Look around you, it's overwhelming. What can you contribute? And every day I look in the mirror and I hold this comic up to the mirror and I look into the mirror and at this little comic strip. Be humble, be thankful. It is a reminder. Be respectful. You are a statue. You are fragile. And when you break, when you shatter, where will those pieces go? Ask, ask this question. Will you ask? Humankind is only as great as you. You, the individual. It begins and ends with you. You must treat this expedition, this search, this life with a reverence and intensity found only in the smallest sticks, the littlest leaf, the tiniest stone, the most minuscule grain of sand on a beach of billions. This is the secret. Do you want the pipe? Do you want to know where the pipe has gone? You ask yourself. You ask. You ask. You ask. Now, where could my pipe be? When I was a young man, remember now, I first saw this comic when I was 18 years old, ages ago. But I was youthful, vibrant. For weeks I denied that a comic strip was having such a profound effect on me. I was much like John Arbuckle. In this middle panel, he says, "Now where could my pipe be?" You can look into his eyes, his half-lowered eyes, and think to yourself, "Now, surely, John, surely you cannot be this naive. This is nothing new for you." And if you've read more of the Garfield comic strips by Jim Davis, you'd understand what I am saying now. Garfield the cat does things like this all the time. He will take things from John. Food, items, anything. This is his very nature. So you see this, and you ought to say, "John Arbuckle, come now. You are lying to yourself. You are lying to yourself and to all of us if you pretend to have not any idea where your pipe has gone. Perhaps you think you left it somewhere else, but you're not so forgetful. You are lying to yourself. Yes. You are lying to yourself, John Arbuckle. You know that Garfield has the pipe. Somewhere deep down, you know this. You don't even need to think the question. And that was me when I saw this strip. 1 week passed, and each morning I'd open my drawer and slam it shut again. I would go to look at the comic, but I'd pause and think, "Oh no, I don't need this comic. I don't need to look at it." But there I was, lying to myself. I did need to see it, and so I did. It's cathartic. You give in, and that is the transition from the second panel of life to the third panel of life. It is a simple story structure, the passage from the second act to the third, the twilight of things. John gives in to his suspicions. He knows the truth. He's always known the truth. He yells out, "Garfield, Garfield, Garfield!" It is like pressure from a steam valve being released. The buildup is unbearable, and then it's gone. So it is like this. When I speak about the truth, the light, the radiance, this is the kind of thing I'm talking about. This is the essence of this brilliant work of art. The practical mixing, meeting, agreeing with the spiritual, it is all here. But spirituality is not an easy thing to confront. You might find yourself able to wrap your mind around a simple math problem or a basic newspaper article, but intellect is much less subjective. What is spirituality? And how have I found spiritual peace and serenity in Garfield? A long time ago, after I encountered the pipe strip, I spent some time, as I mentioned before, soul searching. When something impacts you or alters your very perception so greatly, there is a long period of confusion and recovery time. It's as if you don't know who you are, and that can be a very scary prospect, especially if you thought you had a good grasp on that sort of thing. Imagine if Jim Davis did not know who he was. Would he be capable of shaping the cultural landscape as he's done? No, of course he wouldn't. And how about his characters? John, What if Jim Davis suddenly woke up and didn't know who John was? What if he couldn't make the informed decisions to accurately depict Garfield's personality because he could no longer specify or demarcate the boundaries of Garfield's behavior? What kind of comic would that be? You see? So draw the parallel. I saw this comic, and yes, I was disoriented. And if I didn't reconcile this issue with myself, what kind of person would I be? Undoubtedly dire circumstances, but remember, this was not a math problem. This was not an article. This was not something I could just figure out. And as skeptical as I was, I realized that faith and spirituality were avenues that required exploring. At first, I tried long nights reading Garfield by candlelight or aromatic meditation settings while thinking of Garfield, but nothing snapped. Nothing clicked. I still felt lost. But I kept it up. I hired a shaman and a young personal yogi Sikh guru, Avram Dav Singh Sahib. I pushed and pushed, determined to find myself. And then a miracle happened. Upon retrieving my morning paper to clip the Garfield comic, I noticed a young girl selling lemonade 2 houses down. She sat occupied at her stand. She had no customers in sight, so I approached and saw that she was coloring. I looked at her drawing. 3 rectangular boxes, a man in a blue shirt, an orange cat. I knew what this was. Even in her crude scribbles, I knew exactly what this was. She was drawing a Garfield comic. I looked at her words and I saw that in her strip, John asked Garfield to retrieve a newspaper. Funny, since I've done just that for myself. Garfield is sarcastic, but agrees to it. He returns and calls John Sahib. John exclaims that the paper is all chewed up, but then Garfield says, and I quote, Sahib asks fish, paper is wet. Sahib asks cat, paper is holy. I remember the words and ran back to my house. I thought, how odd that Sahib shows up in the strip, and my spiritual advisor's name is Avram Dav Singh Sahib. Coincidence, surely, but nonetheless, I spent the next 16 hours poring through my clipped Garfield comics, looking for the strip this young girl had been coloring. I couldn't find it. And I eventually fell asleep right on my kitchen table. The next morning, I retrieved my paper again and I clipped the Garfield comic. The date was July 12th, 1983, and there it was. The Sahib strip in all its glory. The girl had been drawing the next day's strip. Well, I ran right out of my house. I ran back to where she was, but she was gone, and in place of the lemonade stand was a for sale sign. They'd moved out. I rushed back to my house to call Avram, but I was informed that he'd moved away as well. I reeled for several hours, then it all connected for me. It was meant to be. It was meant to be this way. Jim Davis, John, Garfield. It was always meant to be this way for me. They moved to the forefront and everything else fades away. Everything else, the girl, the lemonade stand, Avram's Dav Singh Sahib, it all existed to show me the way, and when I'd found the way, everything else melted away. It was a beautiful miracle. And in July 1978, the day I first saw the pipe strip, was the first day of my life, and that day, July 12, 1983, was the second day of my life. I've never looked back. Garfield has transformed me, and I am a man born anew because of Garfield. When I was in my mid-30s, I was interviewed for a documentary. It was a documentary on the subject of cat behavior. Now, I have had cats my whole life. I have 3 cats now, and at the time of this documentary interview, I had 4 cats. I sat down for the interview and was joined by a veterinarian who specialized in feline. Dr. Carolyn Wilmans was her name, I believe. and the doctor discuss color blindness in animals and how it affects their behavior. She specifically brought up the fact that cats are red-green colorblind. They can see colors, but they can't tell the difference between red and green. And look at the color choice in this strip here. Garfield sits on a green floor behind a pinkish red wall. I heard this and I immediately pulled a copy of the comic from my wallet to show to the doctor. I moved so fast I'm sure I nearly scared her. I pointed at the paper and said, like this, look at this here, this cat, Garfield, he's colorblind, he must be. That must be the answer here. Like this. As overexcited as I was, I managed to take in her response. She said, yes, a cat in this room would have a hard time differentiating the wall from the floor. Add to that cat's known spatial confusion and you have the makings of a cat rage room. Now, she informed me this isn't exactly common knowledge among cat owners, but a seasoned cat owner or someone particularly perceptive will have picked up on it. So what's incredible here is not only is Garfield's behavior symbolic of the devil and all the evil constructs in the world, but also it is rooted in science and scientific fact. Look at that. You cannot spell fact without cat. Just a little joke there. Just some wordplay, but getting back on track. And you can't spell track without cat. Okay. I digress. I gotcha. Enough kidding around. It is established here that Garfield is in a rage, an ultimate rage of fury and hatred caused by colorblindness. We know the what. We know the why. But let us examine the how. The how of his rage is particularly interesting here. We've looked at his posture and called it powerful, in control, statuesque, etc., etc. Composed rage. It's peculiar, and I've talked to a number of psychologists and psychiatrists and even a couple of anger management therapists about this concept. Could we see the same kind of behavior in a human? Is Garfield representative of something more specific than just chaos and rage? Deciphering this is going to take some perseverance for sure. The psychologist pointed to a phenomenon in humans, and yes, I believe one of the anger management counselors brought it up as well. The idea that people oftentimes will bottle their rage. Garfield the cat here, well, he could be bottling his anger inside, shoving it deep into his cat gut to ignore and deal with at a later time. Well, no, that's not exactly right. Garfield has already acted out. He's already stolen the pipe. He's smoking the pipe. He's already dealt with his anger. He's already lashed out. So, psychologically, what is going on here? What is this cat doing, and how does it impact his owner, John Arbuckle, psychologically? Well, Garfield is angry. He is acting on his anger. But is this passive anger or aggressive anger? Passive. It is passive because if Garfield has a problem with John specifically, he's choosing a passive way of dealing with that problem. He's not confronted John and said, John, I have a problem with the way you've decorated this room. As a cat, I am colorblind, and this sends me into a rage. You've created a rage room for me here, and I don't like it. I want you to change it. Instead of that confrontational approach, though, Garfield has chosen to steal John's pipe. And that in turn angers John. But John decides to be aggressively angry and yell at Garfield. So now instead of a calm conversation between two respectful parties, you have two heated, angry individuals, each with a problem and no direct line to solving it. The layered emotions here tell a story with tight, focused brevity that would make Hemingway weep. This is an entire drama in just 3 panels, people. But let's not be remiss and miss the humor of the situation, the absurdity of it all. For certainly there is a reason the visual shorthand for drama includes both a crying mask and a laughing mask. Comedy and tragedy complement each other and meld together to create drama. Tension, the height of humanity, the peak of art that reflects back to us our own condition. And here, in its basest form, we can laugh at this comic. Yes, comic, in which a cat smokes a pipe. When is the last time you've seen such a thing in your life? Never, I presume. I certainly never have. The Greek muse Thalia's presence is strong in this work of art here. Comedy. It is comedy. And if you look at the structure again, you'll see this perfect form of thirds works magically for the transmission of yes, a joke. The joke is as old as time. Even cavemen told jokes. And the joke here is that John has lost his pipe. Well, he thinks he has. But lo and behold, it is the cat Garfield who has the pipe. Surprise, surprise, the cat is smoking. Again, the transition from setup to punchline takes place between the second and third panels. But make no mistake, the comic is more than just a comic. Yes, it is funny, of course it is. It is operating at the height of sophisticated humor on par with any of Shakespeare's piercing wit. On the one hand, Garfield the comic with John the man, humor is art. The other hand, Garfield comic with John the man, stirring, no, riveting, drama. As with everything, it is tension and release. Tension and release. A cycle. I keep returning to this idea because it is so omnipresent. Yes, you could, and yes, I have done this on more than one occasion. You could print this comic strip on a giant piece of paper. The dimensions would be something like 34 inches by 11 inches. Now tape the ends together with the comic facing inward. Stick your head in the middle of this Garfield comic loop and read. Start at the first panel. John is reading the newspaper. He feels for something on the end table. Second panel, he sets the newspaper down. Something is not right. Now, where could my pipe be, he thinks. And then the payoff. The third panel. Garfield has John's pipe and is smoking it. But the paper is in a loop around your head, so that you can see that once again John is in his seat reading the paper. And so on and so on. You could literally read the comic strip for eternity. I've spent many a relaxing Sunday afternoon reading this strip over and over. I'm reminded of the Portuguese death carvings, which always begin and end with the same scrawled image. So this idea of repetition, and the beginning being the end, and the end being the beginning, it's not new. It is an ageless tradition among the best storytellers humanity has ever offered. And I'm not wrong to include cartoonist Jim Davis in that exalted set for this particular strip alone. I'm not foolish enough to deny that great art is subjective, divisive even, and that some people see this Garfield comic and shrug with no real reaction. But I will say that I believe everyone in the world should see it. At the very least, see it. You should all see it. Read it. Spend some time with it. Spend an hour reading it. What's an hour? Yes, you could watch some television program. You could play some fast-paced video games or computer games. Yes, you could do all those things. But it's just an hour. And if you give this strip a chance, if you look into John Arbuckle's eyes, if you look into John Arbuckle's soul, you might find that you'll really be looking into your own soul. It's self-discovery. That is what I'm talking about here. You have the opportunity, the possibility. It could change you. Don't be afraid. You know, just last week I was eating lunch near the municipal court, like I do every Thursday, and there was a plumbing van parked out in front, and a man, a plumber, would step out from the court and retrieve something from his van every so often. A few times this happened. I thought nothing of it, just a plumber doing some work at the municipal court. But then he came out and looked through his van, and it was clear. He couldn't find something. I noticed and thought, well, that's sort of similar to the Garfield comic in a way. Someone looks for something, can't find it. But yes, that probably happens billions of times a day around the world. But then this plumber put his hands on his hips. Then he scratched his head and he He said aloud, "Now where could my pipe wrench be?" Well, at this, I leaped off the bench. Sandwich still in hand, and I rushed over. I shouted, "What was that you said?" He looked at me and said, "What?" "I can't find my pipe wrench." And I said, No, say it like how you just said it." He scratched his head and repeated, "Now where could my pipe wrench be?" I slapped him on the back and said, "Garfield!" He looked so confused, so I said it again. Then I said, "Your orange cat took it." And I laughed and laughed. And he smiled and went back into the courtroom. I walked away knowing that the plumber and I, two complete strangers, bonded over this Garfield comic. You see, life imitates art. It becomes a common ground. I have a feeling that if I see this plumber again, we'll be sharing stories like two old friends, because we've been united by art. We have a common love for Jim Davis and his characters, his writings, the humor, the drama, that rascal Garfield the cat. Oh, and by the way, if you're wondering what I was having for lunch that day, it was a ham sandwich with an apple and potato chips in a bag. I had a soda as well. I think it's important to view the pipe strip in philosophical terms. We've touched briefly on the notion of existentialism. That theme is very prevalent in the strip. Garfield is, in fact, a modern existential anti-hero. But if Garfield embodies the bewilderment in a meaningless life, what is John? What are the telltale signs that informs John's philosophical standpoint, his approach, what style of thinking he represents? John is depicted as being grounded in the material world, a world of things. He is surrounded by objects, and he touches these objects. He interacts with them. The newspaper, the end table, the chair, his clothes, all these physical things make up John's world. In some sense, even his cat Garfield is an object to him, a thing. The first ideology that comes to mind when thinking of objects in the tangible world is pragmatism. Is John Arbuckle a pragmatist? His beliefs stem from a useful, coherent view of his environment. A sort of cause and effect understanding of his world helps him. A, deduce that his pipe is missing, and B, catch his cat Garfield using the pipe. This kind of empirical and logical thinking lends credence to the idea that John is indeed a pragmatist. Although it is hard to entirely ignore the rest of the Garfield comic canon. While Garfield is consistently anarchic and embraces the chaos and absurdity of life, John Arbuckle exhibits an erratic, unpredictable mix of philosophical behaviors. At times he is borderline, delusional, an idealist, an almost slap-happy version of Don Quixote. Other moments he is rigid, nearly to the point of being obsessive, somewhat like a structuralist, and certainly has streaks of sarcasm and negativity that might classify him as a skeptic. But isn't there some universal truth in this approach? How can any one man, how can John Arbuckle be just one thing? How can any of us be just one thing? We're an amalgamation of ideas and emotions, conducts and functions, thoughts and feelings. John Arbuckle may very well inhabit tenets of nearly every major philosophical tract known to man. We all might. Characters are reduced to make them recognizable, definable. A story needs a good guy, a story needs a bad guy. But rarely is one person defined in such black and white terms. Even Garfield, with all his bad behavior, Machiavellian motivation, and general ne'er-do-well attitude, can be kind and thoughtful. You just have to find that rare strip. Speaking philosophically about the entire Garfield franchise, it's an incredibly accurate depiction of life. Its bold lines and bright colors are merely a facade, a red herring, a lie. This cartoon is not a cartoon at all. It is not a caricature. It is not caricature despite adopting caricature as its visual style and tone. But I don't really like to speak in broad, sweeping generalizations about Garfield. The comic has been running for over 30 years. To try and boil that all down is just, well, it's impossible. I think the only way, and any historian worth his salt will agree with me, is to look at individual moments, isolated instances, single comic strips. Can I discuss this one strip in the context of the entire run of Garfield? Yes, I do that just as a film historian might analyze one movie in relation to the history of all movies, or a war enthusiast might look at a single battle's impact on an entire war. The pipe strip is just an instance in the lives of John and Garfield. Perhaps John is not a pragmatist at all. Let's look at this again. Maybe John is exhibiting the traits of a rationalist thinker. His question, "Now where could my pipe be?" is a clue that his thought process stems from the early rationalist questions posed by René Descartes. The well-known quote, "I think, therefore I am," attributed to Descartes is applicable. Another close look at the strip and we see that Jim Davis chose to draw John thinking his question. "Now where could my pipe be?" John does not speak this question aloud. So Jim Davis is also exploring the mind-body duality. John's question operates on the level of a literal question, but it also examines the nature of reality. Jim Davis's epistemological approach tells us something about the human condition. John's thoughts remain the focal point of this strip. The comic is quite literally centered around his thought. Now where could my pipe be? This is his reality. This is where cognition and the power and function of the mind take over. As Plato believed, the body is just a shell for John Arbuckle. Yes, he can use his physical body to read his paper or cross his legs, but these inputs of touch, sight, hearing, etc., these senses are the triggers of the mind. As we see here, the mind is something greater. It is the originator of ideas, and ideas are forever, immortal. Immortality through thought, a major theme in literature and philosophy. And isn't that what Mr. Jim Davis himself has achieved? Will he live forever? The universe will continue to spread and spread outward, and entropy will turn a chaotic infinity into a homogeneous, controlled system. This will take billions of years, and in that time, humans will push technology to heights we can't imagine. We'll explore and inhabit space and occupy more and more of the universe, just as time allowed our ancestors to multiply in numbers and populate more and more of the earth. And as the specific people come and go, their physical bodies will be born and grow and die, but their thoughts will remain. And Jim Davis's comics, his glorious Garfield comics, are recorded ideas of his that will still be here. Even when the earth is no longer inhabitable, and humanity has long since moved away to bigger planets, they'll carry with them a record we all keep. Mark my words. And look at what we've started. What is the internet? What is the online world if not a record? A never-ending feed of ideas, immortal ideas, forever placed in the ether of dualism. What is an idea? And where does it live? And how does it manifest itself? Can it live forever? Will it live forever outside of these physical husks of ours, our bodies? And John Arbuckle and Garfield started merely as thoughts, and they've become so much more. That old cliche rings true. They've taken on a life of their own. And life may not be what we think. Life brings to mind beating heart, breathing lungs, blinking eyes. But the real life is in our imaginations. And who better embodies the definition of imagination if not a simple man, a cartoonist who puts his ideas to paper so they may live on, that our children, and our children's children, and their children's children's children can access the wealth of ideas that have accumulated thus far. They will plug themselves into an information grid and they will have access. They will read every Garfield comic. 80,000 years from now, a child will see simple John Arbuckle reading a newspaper. He will feel around for something that that something is not there. He will lift his head and think, now where could my pipe be? And Garfield will be smoking the pipe. And John will yell, Garfield! And what then? 80,000 years from now? The child reading this comic will smile. And that smile will transcend space and time and the physical limitations of this existence, whatever it may be. However many dimensions exist, there will always be Garfield. And there will always be its creator.